Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Valeria and this is the Off-Road Range. In the previous video, I talked about bad habits and how to acquire good habits. I also touched upon the topic of addiction, and today I'd like to talk about it because habit and addiction differ in the mechanism of formation and action. While habits can be relatively easily changed, addiction is characterized by a strong urge to continue even with active work on yourself, actively destroying your brain, body, and you as a person, taking away your freedom and life. The most important difference is that addiction is built in, interfering with the smooth function of the body, disrupting the natural production of chemicals. This forces you to demand different substances from the external environment for the production of those chemicals that were originally intended to work as independently from the environment and substances as possible. A habit works in a different way. A habit is certain stable neural connections in the brain. Under certain conditions, at some time, they give a signal that it is necessary to perform certain actions. Often, they are performed unconsciously, and habits do not always mean something bad. A habit is not the same as a bad habit. The habit of doing exercises, the habit of hugging loved ones upon returning home, the habit of brushing your teeth before going to bed, and so on. These are all well-established algorithms of actions that either improve or worsen your life. And with the help of certain rules, you can introduce or eliminate certain habits. But I have a separate video about habits, so let's get back to addictions. What is addiction? The most common addictions. Impact of addictions. Reasons for emerging. Formation mechanism. Addictions as a source of multi-billion-dollar fortunes. And what to do with addiction. What is addiction? Addiction is a chronic disorder of the brain functions involved in reward, motivation, and memory. With addiction, a person lacks self-control in the desire to get what he wants, be it using a substance, performing an action, or exhibiting a certain behavior. A person experiences a compulsive and obsessive desire for reward, which becomes a priority above everything else. Dependent person cannot resist the object of addiction, even if its use or consumption leads to a destructive lifestyle. He doesn't pay attention to what problems his behavior may lead to, and he is not able to respond emotionally to requests from other people regarding the subject of addiction. Addictions are divided into two types: chemical and non-chemical, or behavioral. Chemical addictions include dependence on certain substances. Alcoholism, excessive consumption of alcohol, sometimes technical ethyl alcohol. Nicotine addiction, smoking. Toxicomania, inhalation of solvent vapors, gasoline, glue. Drug addiction, substances that affect the body in different ways. And also the use of drugs prescribed by a doctor. Sedatives, hypnotics, anxiolytics, hormonal drugs, serotonin-increasing drugs, drugs prescribed to combat stronger substances. Behavioral addictions include gambling, ludomania, gaming addiction, most often massively multiplayer online role-playing games, addiction to social networks, emotional dependencies, interpersonal, financial, sexual, love addictions, addiction to pornography and masturbation, workaholism, eating disorder, shopaholism. You can find out more about all of the dependencies on your own. But if you'd like me to tell about some of the dependencies, write in the comments. I also will be grateful for your support, including financial, to continue the development and construction of the Off-Road Range. Let's talk about the impact of dependencies. Any addiction always means self-destruction and degradation. The inability of a person to exist without a certain element, substance, behavior, person, means the control of the things over a person and lack of freedom. Addiction is psychological slavery. If there is something that a person periodically needs that is not meant by nature, then the person is not free to choose and act according to plan, cannot relax and feel calm. He cannot follow the chosen schedule, and there is no option in his life where addiction is not taken into account. A person significantly worsens his life. This affects self-development, achievements, relationships, careers, and, in general, establishing the meaning of life, because dependence is part of life, and this is no longer one's own choice. Active destruction of the body occurs, often without the possibility of recovery, since the body has a limited health resource, which, if lost, cannot be recovered with the help of medicine and drugs. If the degradation of the body becomes very deep, then the person won't be able to return to a full lifestyle and stable, clear thought processes. Addiction is accompanied by all kinds of diseases of organs, skin, blood, brain, as well as the development of mental illness. Often these changes are irreversible and require constant maintenance with medications, since our brain is a complex and little-studied system. Some parts of the brain are highly interconnected, and if some areas work unnaturally, the functioning of the entire organ is disrupted. Therefore, of course, this is also a lot of money for the treatment of addiction. Money for doctors, consultants, psychologists, psychiatrists, medications, research, and so on. Despite completely different activities, despite different ways of satisfying needs, despite different categories of people involved in addictions, the mechanism for the formation of addictions is always the same. Addiction works at basic neural, hormonal, and endocrine levels. I will try to explain in simple language. Our body is a very well-balanced structure and constantly adapts to external conditions. To exist, a body must interact with the external environment, constantly receiving certain specific substances to ensure its functions. For example, air, food, water. Further, development involves social interaction, acquisition of material goods, career growth, which is an integral part of self-realization in modern world and allowed to live the life to the fullest. Two key points arise. The first one, in the absence of self-realization, in the impossibility of organizing full-fledged life activities, closing all the necessary areas and solving problems, the risk of addiction as an escape from reality increases. The second one is that the body malfunctions when consuming substances that shouldn't enter the human body according to nature, and when performing actions that were not developed by the human psyche. I want to talk about a malfunction in the body. Our body is 99.9% automated and has been performing its functions without our awareness, influence, and participation for dozens of thousands of years. We automatically perceive information, process it, react to dangers, obey the desire to eat, to sleep, and so on. Very ancient and deep systems and structures of the body are responsible for all this, including brain structures that have been involved in controlling the body and its survival for dozens of thousands of years. Among them, I want to highlight several substances: dopamine, endorphins, and serotonins. Now I will not delve into what the substances are, how they are produced, and what processes they affect. I will say briefly that evolutionarily, we needed the substances so that we unconsciously strive for survival, feel less pain when injured, and most importantly, feel pleasure from life, from actions, from communication, from satisfying needs. And for this reason, we want to repeat these actions. These substances are responsible for giving us a sense of achievement, joy from completed tasks, encouragement, relief, trust, inner satisfaction. In the modern world, the production of the substances helps a person to develop, learn, earn money, receive resources, establish relationships. In short, self-realization. For example, we get pleasure from completing a task, going to the gym, communicating with a loved one, and so on, since dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin are produced in response to certain actions. Thanks to them, we feel alive and want to live, enjoy, and develop further. Two main things are that these substances are produced throughout human evolution, firstly, in certain limited quantities in response to certain actions, and it is often difficult to get a release of the substances because you need to make efforts. And secondly, these substances are produced only endogenously, and this is a very complex work at the biochemical level, which affects all human systems. What does addiction do? Through certain actions or substances, addiction leads to a more intense, rapid production of the substances in large volumes, which should be produced only internally. This production of substances is unnatural in the real world. For example, drinking alcohol, which leads to feeling of happiness and relax, or completing a level in a computer game and gaining wealth, which very rarely happens in reality. The body believes that you have achieved your goals faster and better, and because of this, the level of substances increases significantly, despite the fact that these were false actions. After receiving such a dose of substances, the body wants to receive more of them. It becomes less interested in complex tasks that require long-term solutions, patience, and mental stress. It is more interesting for the body to receive quick and vivid satisfaction, regardless of the fact that this is a lack of creation and often self-destruction. With the repetition of these actions, with periodic false stimulation, with constant satisfaction of the desire to receive necessary sensations, an addiction is formed. The substance or behavior that stimulates is embedded in the biochemical process of metabolism. It suppresses the effect of substances and reduces production, since the body gets tired of such intense work. It doesn't have such a resource for the constant production of hormones and neurotransmitters. Consequently, they themselves are no longer produced as needed for a full life, so that a person feels good without external stimulants. It reduces the sensitivity, reaction, and perception of the body to substances, since the monotonous model becomes boring, sensitivity is dulled due to fatigue, and as a consequence, resistance is developed. This means that a larger dose is required to obtain the same level of pleasure. It replaces substances that were previously produced naturally with those that a person uses externally. In action and structure, external and internal substances can be similar, and one can replace the other. Moreover, external substances can act more widely and more strongly, that is, have a more pronounced effect. There is a complete disruption of all body processes, lack of control, destruction of the psyche, brain, and so on. The stronger the effect of a substance or behavior, the brighter it is for the body. The faster and stronger the addiction is formed, the more difficult it is to get rid of it. The stronger the connection between a person and addiction is formed, since addiction includes environment, that is, triggers a person reacts not physically but psychologically to. As a good example, I can give listening to a song from the past or smelling a certain smell from the past. You instantly return to the past with your memories, emotions, sensations, that is, you are completely immersed. Psychological addiction works the same way. In addition, the social environment has a strong influence, which must be changed, but a person does not always make enough effort to enter a new social circle. A simple and clear confirmation that addictions are formed at the neurophysical level, being integrated into biochemical processes, is withdrawal syndrome. Abrupt withdrawal from addictive substances or behaviors can cause serious damage to mental and physical health, ranging from severe apathy to death. Therefore, getting rid of addiction is a huge, complex, long-term work that brings a lot of pain, requires enormous efforts, and produces results slowly and unstable. What are the reasons for addiction? This may be root, but the main reason is the lack of brain. In 99% of cases, a person knows in advance, even subconsciously, that he is doing badly, but he does it anyway. In 99% of cases, a person has a problem that he needs to solve, but he chooses an easy way. Often, the causes of dependencies are lack of strength and ability to say no, lack of understanding for oneself of what is good and bad, actions to spite someone, which means that the person is still a child, a feeling of permissiveness and impunity, which increases when acting for addiction because it thinks that nothing terrible has happened to you, the desire for involvement and approval, that is, acceptance into a social group, boredom and the availability of something simple and effortless, obsession and interest in forbidden things, the desire to escape from the real world, to get away from problems, at least for a while, lack of responsibility, overwork, when dependence becomes a substitute and a feeling of relaxation, incompetent treatment, stupidly laziness. And many of these factors are part of such problems as procrastination and depression. These two factors can provoke a huge mountain of problems and are very interrelated with each other. Procrastination is not depression, but it is constantly putting things off for the future with the awareness that work needs to be done. A person misses opportunities, but at the same time, he continues to do it. The result is stress, low self-esteem, and other symptoms leading to a vicious circle and worsening problems. Depression is a very broad and complex medical topic that is still stigmatized and still lacks accurate research and treatment. But it is known for sure that there are many factors that can lead to it. If these are external factors, it is necessary to consult competent specialists who can find a real cause, choose psychological treatment tactics, and determine activities in order to prevent the onset of symptoms in the future. If these are internal processes, such as metabolic disorder, then most likely treatment will be aimed at restoring function. I believe that in both cases, it is necessary to influence the causes as much as possible, avoid antidepressants, and choose an integrated approach so that external and internal factors do not enhance the effect on each other and do not cause a worsening of the condition. There are also factors that aggravate a person's predisposition to addiction. Biological and genetic factors. Do relatives have a tendency to addiction? Psychological factors. Emotional and temperamental characteristics. Self-control mechanisms. Social factors. Living condition, upbringing, availability of the subject of addiction. However, these factors cannot justify addiction. There is another reason for all addictions on Earth. Addictions have been a huge global problem for all humanity for many years. If we are talking about drug, nicotine, and alcohol addictions, then their histories go back more than several thousand years. With the development of marketing, social networks, with the growth of social pressure and digital communication, with the strengthening of capitalist orientation and the pursuit of profit, non-chemical addictions have appeared. Gambling, gaming addiction, addiction to social networks, addiction to pornography and masturbation, workaholism, eating disorders. Why do these huge addiction problems exist and develop? They are the source of multi-billion-dollar fortunes. You cannot imagine billions and billions that circulate in every industry. Ludomania and gambling addiction, masturbation and films for adults, drug addiction, smoking and alcoholism, psychiatric care and the medical industry that treats these addictions. All of them have a margin of thousands of percent. Just think, a 1000% return on every dollar invested. And there are billions of such dollars. Those who make billions on this, or moreover are the top of the elite of the elite, will make every effort to maintain their positions. People addictions give them the opportunity to endlessly enrich themselves and act in their own interests. A person becomes dependent, destroys his life, career, loses the ability to think clearly and set goals, is deprived of a stable financial position, and after that undergoes treatment for a very long time and to no avail, without being able to change even his life, not to mention changes around him. These people have power, resources, people, and I'm not talking about a global conspiracy now. Just look at history and the current situation. Nothing happens for nothing. Any events are initiated by someone and, if possible, controlled. And bad habits and addictions help them to retain and gain power. Even the simplest example. In some places, growing substances is much cheaper than buying them. And this is government policy for the development of domestic business. Buying a package of substances can be several times cheaper than buying food for yourself. And this is also the policy of the state, when a person doesn't have the opportunity to feed himself, but there is an opportunity to escape from this horror into an illusory world. Think about it. Do we really have crisis and a deteriorating economic situation, or just ordinary people in this crisis, while all the money and resources go into the hands of 1%? The above-mentioned areas bring in billions of billions, even if it is a legal business. For example, food sector with insatiable marketing and eating disorders, casinos and slot machines, social networks which are always endless and free in terms of payment with money, but very expensive when considering your personal data, your time, development, and opportunities. Everything that prevents people from developing, living consciously, setting goals, achieving results, all this plays into the hands of those in power. You need to understand that, in fact, it is not the law of the market that works here, where demand creates supply. There is a law of a jungle here, where some dominate due to the weaknesses of others, where some make money on the weaknesses of others. But even if you blame someone, changes will not follow, because changes shall start with yourself. What to do with addiction? The general topic of addiction treatment is too complex to be discussed by a person without specialized education and experience. Firstly, this will be simply facts from a person who read and heard something somewhere. Secondly, this is a huge disrespect for specialists and patients. And thirdly, very often no one needs advice and no one asked for it, especially from an incompetent person. If anyone gave advice like that and it worked, the world would be completely different and not necessarily better. What I can say is that it all starts with you, the beginning and the end of addiction. Therefore, the most important thing is to prevent dependencies from appearing. Read, analyze, develop, learn about how the body works, how various actions and events affect a person. Analyze your actions, set priorities. Prevention is better than cure. If we talk about addictions that a person can work on independently, then all the work and responsibility is only yours. Moreover, if thousands and millions of people were able to overcome their demons, then everything in your hands. And even if they couldn't, your potential is still not limited by what is already known. So everything depends on you. Perhaps the mechanism for forming healthy habits, which I described in the video number 53, will help you. In addition, the main recommendation from me and the best doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists I have the honor of being acquainted to is: do not use any substances that disrupt any of your internal processes. Do not use them as much as possible. Do not use drugs that cause addiction, even if they are medicinal. drugs for insomnia, drugs that increase serotonin levels, hormonal drugs, including supposedly immunomodulating ones. All complex substances that were not originally intended for human consumption cause a significant change in well-being, put stress on the liver, on the intestines, on the adrenal glands, on the kidneys, on clear thinking, on your cognitive abilities, especially in the long term. And of course, they are an additional factor for addiction. Work on your lifestyle and the causes of diseases, not the symptoms. If we talk about complex cases, there is a need in an experienced qualified specialist, awareness of long-term work, and acceptance of the situation. And treatment methods must be approached individually. No new addictions, fears, restrictions should be created in a person. For example, dependence on the programs and sessions with specialists, fear of returning to addiction, fear of inability to return to normal life, the perception of oneself as sick for the rest of the life. It is necessary to gradually return the person to a harsh, real environment, where resocialization and acclimatization will be carried out, and all psychological triggers that can provoke a relapse will be eliminated. It is advisable to work in the same area where the addiction appeared in order to break an associative chain. The absence of addiction shouldn't depend on external conditions. It should be an internal freedom. It is very important to have a person nearby who will study this issue independently, analyze the treatment, criticize the methods, since many programs work in isolation from the real world and bring a person to a certain correct state where there are the desired results. A person needs an activity that will have value, creation, a circle of like-minded people. A person might have to spend an enormous amount of time and money, work with many specialists, have endless support from his loved ones, but all the work rests only on him. Finding qualified help, affording treatment financially, enduring it mentally, completely changing life and a social circle is very, very difficult, often impossible. This is a person's struggle with himself. So do not make mistakes. Do not think, I'll do it only once, and one time will not make a difference. You don't know whether it will or not. Statistics say otherwise. And you are most likely an ordinary person with the same biological mechanisms as everyone else. If you want to test your willpower, set yourself goals, develop discipline, maintain a routine. If you want something new sensations, experience, set the task of acquiring a skill and becoming the best at it. Engage in self-development. Diligence, perseverance, patience, persistence will bring more results in the future in all areas of life, will bring more benefits. Short-term release of emotions and quick satisfaction of your desires will only aggravate the situation. I think that by watching my other videos, you can improve your lifestyle to some extent. The main thing is don't afraid to admit your problems and to turn to specialists. Otherwise, without taking this first step, you will never be able to get rid of your addictions and solve your other problems. Trust only evidence-based medicine and other sciences. Do not turn to charlatans who only will waste your time and money. In unstable times, do not trust those who create the illusion of solving problems. Otherwise, you can only worsen your condition. And remember that the main work rests on you. It was Valeria, the Off-Road Range. I wish you all the best and see you soon.